All right, welcome back here for the final part of our Extreme Ownership Muster review by Aide De Camp. In this section, we're going to be talking about worst case scenarios, unified strategic goals, barriers to extreme ownership, leadership challenges, assessments, implementation, and then wrapping up with leadership is the solution. First, we've got a video for you here.
One of my direct subordinates, one of my guys that worked for me, he would call me up or pull me aside with some major problem, some issue that was going on, and he'd say, "Boss, we got this and that and the other thing." And I'd look at him and I'd say, "Good." And finally one day he was telling me about some issue that he was having, some problem, and he said, "I already know what you're gonna say." And I said, "Well, what am I gonna say?" He said, "You're gonna say good." He said, "That's what you always say. When something is wrong and going bad, you always just look at me and say, good." And I said, "Well, yeah, when things are going bad, there's gonna be some good that's gonna come from it. Didn't get the new high-speed gear we wanted? Good. Didn't get promoted? Good. More time to get better. Oh, mission got canceled? Good. We can focus on another one. Didn't get funded. Didn't get the job you wanted. Got injured. Sprained my ankle. Got tapped out? Good. Got beat? Good. You learned. Unexpected problems? Good. We have the opportunity to figure out a solution." That's it. When things are going bad, don't get all bummed out, don't get startled, don't get frustrated. If you can say the word good, guess what? It means you're still alive. It means you're still breathing. And if you're still breathing, well then hell, you still got some fight left in you. So get up, dust off, reload, recalibrate, re-engage, and go out on the attack.
It's pretty hard
One
to
of
watch
my-
any of these videos and not get pretty amped up. So
Right.
let's get jacked up to talk about worst case scenarios. So yeah, in worst case scenarios, we talked a lot about at Muster, we did some like fire team exercises. So we did some role playing where we were interacting with other people in the audience that were in proximity to us and like kind of going through things. And this in this exercise, we actually did like this was the buck example. And they were like, yeah, everybody works with a buck, a guy that's like got a bad attitude and hard to work with. Like we had the opportunity to like each be buck and like how do you engage somebody or how do you interact with somebody who's like that? And so, the role playing specifically is really good in terms of like worst case scenario being not like in processes or systems or problems in the world or in our business, but it's around like dealing with irrational people. Like that's a great opportunity for us to role play as leaders.
Yeah. So I mean, just go ahead, Nick.
I was just gonna say during that role playing between the two of y'all, like one of the notes I wrote was I don't remember which one it was, but y'all asked why a lot, which is directly aligned with what we've talked about in the past. Explaining the why will help in worst case scenarios because people will know that aspect and be able to work towards the solution. And the other aspect is like getting out of these worst case scenarios is this standard operating procedures and taking that perspective detachment and finding the solution that way. Those were my notes that I took down when they were talking about this.
Yeah, I mean, everybody in every job is going to have to deal with difficult or irrational people. Like everyone is going to have to face this at one time or another, and most people are going to face it a lot or frequently. And it says here, how do you get better at this practice? role playing is great because you get to practice it, but you also need to look at every opportunity as, oh no, here's this guy and he's always so difficult. Like, oh good, here's the opportunity to practice dealing with difficult people. Here's an opportunity to get better at each interaction I have with him. We should be getting better at communication, at dealing with whatever his problem is. Maybe I can listen to him better. Let him be heard. Someone says here, taking ownership totally disarms most employees having this issue. And I really like that. And look forward to use it more when I'm dealing with difficult people or difficult situations, right? Somebody comes to you and they're mad and you're their boss and they're upset about whatever went wrong or whatever you asked them to do or whatever it is. When you take ownership, I guarantee you that's not what they expected you to do, because your natural tendency is to get defensive, to want to argue back, to say, no, you're just being difficult, right? When you take ownership, well, maybe I didn't communicate that clearly. Maybe I didn't provide the resources that you needed to be able to perform the task I gave you. How can I make that easier on you? Totally disarms their issue.
Yeah, one of the notions that they talked about in this part of muster was, when you encounter people, no matter what, like whatever like emotion they're portraying or projecting at you, like they talked about like reflect and diminish. So like if somebody's like really angry with you, like you connect with them by reflecting their emotion back at them, like, oh man, I understand completely why you're so angry. That, that drives me nuts also, like, and then you diminish their anger, but by like following that statement up with something like, but here's maybe like a perspective that you're not looking at. And so it's kind of like absorbing their emotion, reflecting it back at them, and then diminishing it yourself. And that kind of de-escalates stuff. So I thought that was a really good like tactic for when you are, because it's not like we think about like, these situations with difficult employees being like people getting angry or upset, but there's all kinds of emotions that we interact with or encounter on a daily basis. So I think that tactic of just like reflect and diminish really like is really helpful in dealing in these situations. So
yeah, and using like it says there, listening as a tool. They said that should always be step one, or usually always is step one, is listening, hearing them out, and that way you can use the tactics and things that you've experienced in the past to figure out the problem and solve it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so next up, we're talking about unified strategic goals. And so when we were going through this section, like, again, great tie into EOS, because like the reason why we're doing EOS, the purpose or why of EOS is to create alignment. Like we want everybody from top to bottom in our organization to understand what our long-term, what our near-term goals are, and how and help us develop the how we're going to get there, and so I think that's, like, to me, that there's just another huge tie-in to EOS here. When we talk about alignment, it's crucial that everybody knows, where we're moving towards, and that we're moving towards a common goal. So there's in this aspect of unified strategic goals, they also talk about the indirect approach. And so how even Jocko like talks about the notion or the concept of psychological reactance. And you can actually, we're gonna like hyperlink that in the resource docs in this module. But listen to how he describes that, how he defines psychological reactance. But it's the high level like overview of it is like, generally is that it's something that we already know. People don't like to be told what to do, or they don't like to be told what they can't do. And in a lot of cases, like when you tell somebody to do something, they're not gonna go do that thing. Or when you tell them not to go do something, they go do that thing, right? Like we see this probably with our kids a lot, and like it's like there's a psychological element there, like that humans at a fundamental level don't want your will or your direction. Like they don't want things imposed upon them, and so that's why the indirect approach is so important. Like we've all heard of like reverse psychology. Like reverse psychology is the indirect approach,
Yeah, something Jocko said is, ego is reactive armor. Uh, like you said, people don't like being told what to do. Sometimes you have to accomplish the goal, avoid attacking someone else's ego. Sometimes you have to even go so far as it's feeding into their ego, because that's what they need. That's what you know. Instead of being critical of it, you're listening. Instead of telling them what to do, you're asking them what to do. But really, with that, we're trying to accomplish the goal. We're trying to achieve what's best for the team. And where he talks about escalate directness, I really like that part of it, because it's by asking and not telling, and by listening and not being critical, you don't have to be super direct. You can just kind of let them come around to it on their own. And most of the time they're gonna, without you having to tell them exactly what to do. You just kind of feed into what they're needing out of that conversation to get to where the team needs to be.
Yeah, it really speaks to like understanding the why, right? Like again, in the Buck example, it's like Buck's not filling out his paperwork, but he's like a badass performer. Like he's a top performer in his role, but he's not doing a simple part of his role because he doesn't want to, because he's been told to do it, but he also doesn't understand why it's important. I think, like to speak to what you were saying in that Buck example, is almost everybody's like first like reaction to dealing with Buck in role playing was, Buck's like, yeah, I'm awesome. Why do I have to do this paperwork? And it's like, yeah, dude, you are awesome. But you know how you could be even more awesome is by doing the paperwork.
How corporate is going to know that you're awesome?
Yeah,
because they're going to see it on the paperwork.
Yeah, and also what makes you like next level awesome is helping other people be awesome. And if you're not doing your paperwork, then the next level, that the group at corporate can't be awesome because you're not giving them what they need to be awesome. So there's like so much there. But that was like a great exercise in like understanding the indirect approach, how to in your case, Kevin, you were talking about like sometimes you have to like stroke somebody's ego instead of attacking it, and that those are good tactics and strategies for doing that. So yeah, so next up we're going to talk about barriers to extreme ownership, like what gets in the way of extreme ownership. So we've got some stuff here. But the important thing, before I let Kevin and Nick talk about like what's preventing us, like some of the fears and stuff like that, like when we understand what our barriers are, we can train, plan, prepare for those things, right? So it's like understanding yourself, where your ego might come into play, those kind of things. So it's all about putting the team first, the mission first, and make people proud through your work. Like we talked about that in Fred Factor, but making your work meaningful, making your work important, like you control all of those things. But it's only through understanding, like looking introspectively, like at yourself and the things that you're doing, like how that's how you do that. That's how you get better. That's how you make your work important. That's how you make it meaningful. So
yeah, I think one of the barriers to extreme ownership is like believing that it's actually your fault and taking ownership of that. So, like, if you don't truly believe it, like, you're not going to believe that it really is your job to take ownership of it. And by taking ownership of stuff that truly isn't your fault, it allows you to fix it. Like, you get the opportunity to fix something that you maybe wouldn't have been involved with otherwise.
Yeah. What the slide shows here is what's preventing us from taking ownership. Fear is the number one. All these fears that fear of losing respect, consequences, being the only one, fear of responsibility. That's huge. Like, I think fear really is probably the biggest barrier to taking ownership. Ego, victim mentality, saying I have no control over this. This wasn't my decision. It came from my boss, or it came from higher up, and I have no say or no control. That's easy when you're trying to give your team a task, and they're not going to enjoy it and they're not going to like it. It's a real easy cop out to say, it's not my fault. It's not my decision. I'm just doing what I'm told. And that's not creating that relationship of trust with them at all. our mindset, our behavioral styles, habit, instinct, that's where practice comes in, right? Training. My favorite takeaway from this part was when he said, how do you know that you're doing the right things? Everything in your life gets better, right? And we talked a little bit about that outside of the muster, but that's, like, what is it? The proof's in the pudding, right?
For sure.
Everything is falling in line and getting better when you make those right decisions.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to like it could be easy for like a lot of our folks to go sit in the audience at something like Muster and you like hear Jocko and Leif talk about, well, yeah, like you shouldn't be afraid of like taking ownership or taking responsibility or taking accountability over something because of like losing respect. Like they all share like the same like these analogies about how like bosses like actually love and appreciate that. So it could be easy to hear them say it, but like I think for us to say it, like I believe like that's where I'm most proud of my people is when they see something that they could have done better or that they've just completely dropped the ball on and they take responsibility for it. Like it does the exact opposite. Like it builds my respect and faith in them, my trust in them. It builds like it builds a better relationship between us when I know that somebody's going to be accountable and take ownership of the work that they're performing. So
yeah.
And I'm sure you guys relate. Like if you're gonna be a lot more responsive, Nick, to like a PM who comes in and says, "Dude, I completely dropped the ball on this. I need help like getting this through production or through like on the install schedule or whatever it is." Like versus, man, I don't know, I didn't do any. This isn't my fault. This is somebody else's fault. Like you're gonna be way more like willing to help in that situation, right? Than when they're taking responsibility for it.
Definitely, 100%. And on top of that, like by you accepting responsibility and owning it, it also allows you to skip that stage of figuring out whose fault it is. So you can move on to finding the solution so much faster.
Yep.
Like that.
All right, next up, we're talking about leadership challenges in general. So I think we all probably have pretty similar notes on this, but the big analogy here was don't be the easy button, right? What does that mean to you, Nick?
Yeah, like I think as leaders, you want to help your team, and so most people will, when someone comes and asks a question or presents a problem, they want to help, so they just give them the answer, give them the solution, and that's great and all in theory. But what is your person you're leading learning? I don't think they're not learning how to be a leader. They're just following you. So if you're not being the easy button, you're asking them to come to you with a solution and then going over maybe the solution instead of giving it to them. Or you're just not solving problems for people. You're not being their easy button.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And like this is really like the spirit behind, I don't know if I actually created this, but I'll take credit for it. I'll take ownership of it. Like the concept of GTS or Google that shit, like that to me, like early on in my career, that was a common saying that I'd have with people. And I think early on it's like very, it was probably too direct and too like harsh, but like the spirit behind telling somebody to GTS is like, hey, you can go find the answers for yourself, and like when you do that, how much more like powerful are you as a human being when you can go solve your own problems? And so that was really like the spirit of that. And then like if you've ever been rubbed the wrong way by me telling you to GTS something like that, it's not my intent. It's to help you understand like when you can solve your own problems, like you're much more valuable to the company. If you need a team of people to solve problems for you, you're probably not that valuable to the company. So
where it says here, the silent leader understands culture is the ultimate decentralized command. I mean, that's it right there. You create a culture one way or the other. You're either creating a culture where you're solving everyone's problems that work for you, or you're creating a culture where people know they're expected to solve that problem. They're expected to take as much ownership of that issue as they can and do as much as they can to solve it on their own.
For sure.
And, that's the culture you create one way or the other.
Yeah. You either you create independence or you create dependence, right? Like that's the option here. That's the choice. So the other thing, just like generally talking about leadership challenge, like it's not easy being a leader. Like there's a lot of nuances in leadership. Like we're all different as leaders. The people we lead are all different. So our followers are all different. Our peers are different. Like you have to adapt, like to, you have to adapt to all the players on the field. Like, and everybody, like I tell my kids, when like my daughter loves to say like, hey, that's not fair. And my response to her always is, it's 100% fair because everything's unfair. Like that's what makes it fair, right? So the idea that like people need to be like treated differently, they need to be led differently than everybody else, and like that's the challenge of leadership is dealing with those differences, those nuances, and so this slide really kind of helps summarize what a silent leader is. That the term silent leader, or the concept of silent leader, came up a lot in muster. And so it's like understanding, like prioritizing relationships first and foremost, like remembering leadership capital and it being withdrawals and deposits, a series of those, like ensuring your communication is simple and clear and concise, creating alignment up and down, even side to side within the org, creating alignment, and like getting everybody focused on their highest priority tasks. There's a scale there for every individual. And then to Kevin's point, like understanding culture is the ultimate way to decentralize command. So, man, these are great things. They're the reason the words are highlighted in red. Like you should be focused on those words as a leader, relationships, communication, alignment, and culture. In the next slide, we're talking about assessments. And to me, the big takeaway on assessments, like in having this conversation or this part of muster, talking about this topic, like the thing that stood out to me, the note that I made is like, you are your own worst enemy. And in fact, and I think we talked about this in our discussion around threat factor, was you should be competing against the person you were yesterday. Like that's who you should be competing against. You are your own worst enemy. You're the one that's procrastinating. You're the ones that's putting things off. You're the one that is choosing to either do the right thing or the wrong thing, right? And so it's the self-assessment that's super important.
Yeah, I mean, what standards are you holding yourself to, right? All those things you just said. You establish a culture of assessment, but not just for you, for your team. It needs to be something that happens often, not rarely. But if you're not humble, if you don't have humility, how are you going to be able to openly and honestly assess yourself on your performance, on all those things? You're not going to be able to, right? And so you have to practice it, train, do it often, teach your people to do it often.
Yeah, absolutely. Nick, you want to share the story about the guy in the Q&A?
Yeah, so honestly, I was going to ask you to do it because your memory's a lot better, and I thought you could tell the story better.
Yeah, so there was a guy who was talking about his young sales team, and these, like, I don't remember if he actually referred to them as millennials or snowflakes or something like that, but the guy couldn't get past the fact that that his team underneath him was not using a Franklin planner to write everything down, right? And he's like, there's just no way that they can be as successful as they want to be without using this Franklin planner, because that's what I've done for 25 years. And like, how can I just get it through their heads that that they need to use this planner and stop using technology? Like everybody in the or at least our group was just kind of laughing at this guy in a fun spirited way, but. Man, it went on for like 5 or 10 minutes. He's like trying to get to the bottom of this with Jocko and Leif and Q&A. And I forget exactly how it wrapped up, but he was just saying, well, like maybe I just need to give them more time to figure this out. And Jocko looked at him and was like, yeah, you're right, dude. It's everybody else is wrong. It's not you at all. Like you got it figured out. Everybody else in the world is wrong. And so
if you remember, he said instead of using a Franklin planner, they just kept putting notes in their phone, and they're on their phones in meetings, and it's just such a distraction. And he asked the whole 800 people who in here uses their phone for business. And like every hand goes up And, no, yeah, bro, it's you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's them. It's not you.
But he didn't relent. He was like sticking on that, even though 800 people raised their hand and said, "Yeah, this is how we would do it." He's like, "But man, this Franklin planner, you gotta put the stuff in your planner. You gotta write the notes down." It's just like,
And
yeah.
no joke, we were in line to meet Jocko after the muster, and this guy was in line behind us talking to those guys. They were at the muster with him, still talking about his Franklin planner. So he's just never going to get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why it starts with you. And he could not get past that. He was the problem. His ego was in there. And it was just frustrating and fine to listen to him because that was the whole muster was talking about ego. Every slide, they would talk about ego. And he could not figure it out that it was him. It was his ego that could not get with the times, I guess. But it was hilarious.
Yeah, and just because like you found the solution that works best for you doesn't mean it's the right solution for everybody else. I mean, we talk about this a lot as we're like planning about like how we want to produce certain content. Like I know that I learn best like through audio and visual stuff. Like when I can watch something or listen to something, like I'm a much better learner in that environment. But I also know that's not how everybody else is. And so, but yeah, to your point, Nick, like he would not drop that. It's just like, this is the best way. This is the only way. And it's just like, dude, you've missed the whole point. Like I hope maybe he should get a refund for Mustard because like it was like really clear that he didn't have the big takeaways that we did.
I kept looking over at Kevin and I was just, how are these people asking these questions? Because it was crazy how big the egos were in that room. They're learning about how to get rid of their ego, and everyone during Q&A, it would be like, dude, it's your ego.
Yeah.
It is. And the Q&A was some of the best learning for me because I thought it was pretty simple to get the ego out, but it's really hard.
Yeah.
It really is because so many people are asking, in my opinion, like kind of dumb questions, and it's always about their ego, and they're blind to it, and they're asking it in front of 800 people. So,
yeah.
I started to wonder if he was a salesman for Franklin Planner.
Yeah, that they did ask him that, right? Like, what do you have, stock or something?
Right, they did.
Man, but I think for me, like seeing those things, like it creates more like empathy on my part towards people who do struggle with that. Because it's, man, you think about like people who, and this guy had obviously been around the block a few times, right? Like he wasn't brand new to, his profession. It's like it's really hard for people who have done things a certain way for so long. And when it comes to ego, if you've been in an environment, especially in construction, where you're on a job site and you're allowed to talk to certain like people a certain way, and you can be rough and harsh with them, like it doesn't mean that like just because you got away with it then doesn't mean that that's what you should be doing now. But it's hard for people to break down those habits, those behaviors. So like it gave me a lot of empathy for those kind of people. It's like it's a battle, man. It's not hard. It's not easy at all to shake that stuff, especially when you've got 20, 25, 30 years of experience doing it this way, and operating with a high level of ego in your role. Like it's tough to shake that. So sticking with assessments, like Kevin hit on the fact that like effective assessments start with humility. Also, the way you train, plan, prepare, manage, and lead dictate the outcome, right? So it's keeping those aspects in mind. There's also another a document that I'm hoping to get a PDF for that balance assessment that we took. I'm gonna try to get. I've asked for Echelon Front to send me the PDF for that so we can link it in the module. So for you guys watching this, if there's a link down there for the balance assessment, it really takes you through the 4 laws of combat: cover and move, simple, prioritize and execute, and decentralized command. Like it takes you through like an assessment where you can like kind of see where you're out of balance on those things. Because again, we know from the dichotomy of leadership, it's about balance, being balanced in those areas. So next slide here. We're kind of getting to the end of the muster in terms of content. We got to talk, real world, like about implementation, like what do we go back into our business and do? And I think the number one thing here is like you got to hold the line. So this is a military like phrase, like holding the line. When you think about like old battle scenes, whether it's the Civil War or World War II, like there's lines on the battlefield that represent different territory that's controlled by you or your opponent, and like you got to hold the line. Don't retreat. Don't back up. Like you've got to be strict, disciplined with yourself towards these principles. That's the most important part of this to me. So.
Yeah, these principles are not difficult to understand, but they are difficult to implement. It's not super easy. It takes, all the stuff we've talked about and all the training and practice, these implementation tactics, using the language, communicating up and down, balancing the dichotomies, like that's huge. Keeping your perspective it starts with you. That's, the implementation part of it is we get opportunities to do it every day in all our actions and all our behaviors and all our conversations. And we talked about that a few times, but, going to these musters, watching this content that we're providing right here, like the more you learn, the better leader you're going to be. And it's just also learning how to implement these things, not just learning the principles, but learning how to implement them.
Yeah, and I would love to say like everybody go right now, get on Amazon and go order Extreme Ownership. But the reality is like we've already highlighted this through all of the parts of this module. Like it almost doesn't matter what leadership book you're picking up. They're going to be talking about the same things, and it's going to be about building relationships and communicating clearly and concisely. It's those very fundamental things that show up and are present in every leadership book. So the implementation is going out and finding those resources, whatever speaks to you. If it's audiobooks, check out audiobooks. If it's podcasts, listen to podcasts. If it's, checking out a book from the library or buying a physical book and reading it, like whatever speaks to you most, like go do it. Take the opportunity to live out our second core value, which is to improve and learn today. Don't do it tomorrow, do it today. So.
Yeah. And like Kevin said, it starts with you and it's contagious. So I would hope that just by having me, Kevin, and Jeff implement this ourselves with our everyday life at work and at home, like it's going to be contagious and it would spread naturally through that. Like that would probably happen. It would have been fun to do that as like an experiment to see, but like it should spread like just because of people seeing the three of us doing it.
Yeah, agree. And as we're getting close to like wrapping this up, man, I don't think that we can talk about detachment enough. To me, it may be one of the areas in our business where we have the most like opportunity to improve. And I would love to hear people around the office talking about their detachment from issues and being able to step back and look around, make a call, like being able to detach. It's a critical skill to leadership, and it's also a critical skill in life. Like one of the tools they offered up for detaching, by the way, was to like prepare or write down how you want to behave. So like if you're thinking through like contingencies, like I think about my day in the morning, I start to think about my day, like what meetings am I going to have? What difficult conversations may come up in those meetings? How do I want to behave? How do I want to interact with people in those meetings? Like, do I want to be frustrated or pissed off? No, I don't. Like, I don't want to show those emotions. So like I prepare for that by writing those things down and like preparing myself to encounter those situations. And it's a great practice in life too, like not just at work. I was having a conversation with Kate, my daughter, last night about this very thing. Like she has a really hard time controlling her emotions. And like the way that she can be better at that is by thinking about the situations that she encounters on a daily basis and how she would typically respond to that and what can she do to act differently, And by doing that, you're able to, before you even encounter it, you're able to detach through that exercise to help frame up like how you're going to behave in those situations. So most of what we encounter on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, year-to-year basis is pretty predictable, And so using detachment as a tool, it's a great way to prepare us for the things we're going to encounter. All right, we're wrapping up. Leadership is the solution. So what we want everybody to know, like everybody that's taking this in, we've already covered this. Every single person that's listening to this and that should be listening and watching this is a leader. You're a leader of yourself at a fundamental level. So when you strive to become a good leader or build good leadership inside your organization, you got to understand it's a campaign. It doesn't happen overnight. And it never stops. It never ends. Like you're constantly making incremental progress, incremental improvements towards you being the best leader you can be. So it's great. It should be comforting in a way because you know it doesn't have to happen tomorrow or overnight, but you should be making those incremental improvements, making progress on the type of leader that you are to yourself and to the individuals that are around you.
Yeah, I really like it is all on you, but not about you.
Yeah.
You know, the goal is to help the team. If the team succeeds, then you as a leader succeed. Jeff said it early on in the first unit. You know, as soon as you put the your interest above the team's interest, you fail as a leader. If you think people aren't going to notice, if you think you can learn all this and manipulate people, that people won't notice that all the maneuvers you're making are self-serving, you're wrong. Like they're going to see it and they're going to know it. It's going to be evident. This isn't the kind of thing that you can just speak but not actually implement and not actually practice.
Yeah, and the practice to me is the key. Like anything you want to get better at in life, anything takes practice. Yep. And so start practicing today. Start practicing some of these strategies, these tactics that we've shared. Like start practicing and get better.
Yeah, and I think you start at zero and you have to build it up from there. Like you don't just snap your fingers and you're there. Like it does take practice to get where you're going. Like I remember thinking during the muster, like I have so much work to do because of all this information to give me and how many things I'm learning, but it wasn't like a negative. I'm like in a hole I need to dig out of. It was like I'm really excited and motivated because of all these things I've learned. So,
yeah, and just to hit on something you just said too, Nick, I really like that the aspect of like, or the notion that you're starting at zero. Not everybody does start at zero. There's probably some leaders, some people in our business that are actually starting in a negative. Like if you've not focused on building relationships and you've abused and imposed your will onto other people, you might be starting from a negative. You might be like, if you dig a hole, in order to stand on top of a hill from that hole, you got to fill that hole back in. And then you start building dirt on top of it, right? So
that's a great point.
It in some cases, you got an even longer road to hoe because you've dug that trench, you've dug that hole. And so you could be starting from a negative, but again, it's incremental progress. It's being better today than you were yesterday and thinking about how you can be better tomorrow than you were today.
Right. And we talked about natural tendencies. If this stuff doesn't come natural to you, and there's a lot of facets of this and not all of it will, right? No, you are going to fail. Like it's going to happen. And that's okay. It's okay to fail. It's okay to have a conversation with someone that you didn't handle correctly and that you didn't succeed in practicing these objectives. And you know what you do? You just get up and you try again. You take the next opportunity to practice and you keep working towards it. And just know that, it's okay if you mess it up. You get to try again. And it's just like the OODA loop. You get to do it again with more knowledge and more feedback and more experience than you had before you failed.
100%. Yep. So the final bullet point on here is like, take ownership. If not you, then who? Right? And leadership is the solution. So, hey, we're wrapping this up. I want to thank, this is kind of a sad moment here, but this is going to be the last training module that 2022 Aide De Camp presents or publishes. And so I really want to thank Nick and Kevin for all their hard work this year and creating our cross-function training modules and working towards being better leaders in our business and helping make other better leaders in our business. That's a true sign of a great leader, is that they've developed other leaders underneath them. And I think you guys are on the right path. I really appreciate all the hard work that you guys have put in. Had a great time at Muster with you guys and getting stuck in Rapids with you as well. So.
Yeah, no, I've learned so much from both of you. And Jeff, thank you for your leadership and helping us through this process. I know this is like your brainchild, Aide De Camp. So I'm really excited to see what y'all do next year. it's been a blast doing it this year and just getting closer to both of you at the same time.
Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunities you gave us here, the opportunities to learn, to get better, to grow our skill sets. It's been an outstanding journey.
Well, thanks again to you guys, and I look forward to seeing you guys continue to grow and flourish here at ArcFab. So with that, we're going to close this up. This is our picture of us with Jocko and Leif. Notice Kevin is not smiling.
You can't smile next to Jocko.
Yeah. And I definitely didn't have the impulse to throw up the fist. I'm more of a Shaka guy, so hang him
I
up.
didn't know what to do, so I kind of just halfway threw it up there.
It'd have been better if your pinky was out, like you were, you're like doing like the half fist, half Shaka. But anyways, hey, thank you to everybody that tuned in for this. We hope you enjoyed it and appreciate any feedback that you have. If you loved it, give us a 5-star rating. Appreciate it.